Well, Pascal, this week we are going to talk about Waterworld. This is your film choice. And before we dive into an analysis of the film itself and the marketing campaigns that surround it, let's have a look at the trailer.
The sun. For millions of years, the source of life. But for one planet, the source of its demise. The temperatures climbed. The vast fields of ice at its poles melted, and the oceans rose. Centuries later, few people remain on this planet once called Earth. Among them, a man who still searches, a woman who still hopes, and a small child who carries the secret to a new beginning. In this place they know only as Waterworld.
Well, they don't make trailers like this anymore. I think we should go back to the days of The Voice. I mean, that guy, it's been part of our life, it would seem for a very long time. You knew that you would be well looked after by The Voice or those trailers. Waterworld, 1995, barely 2 years after, you could say, the birth of the internet in a public domain kind of way. And the most misunderstood film, in my view, somehow tarred with this reputation being a flop, where in fact it's been financially a success globally over time, I grant you. One that to this day is reviewed by the fans galore, has had the DVD, the Blu-rays, the 4K releases, and talking about even a TV series. It's just an interesting one for us to explore. But yeah, I went to the movies in 95, like many people, and watched it. And I absolutely loved the universe, the world setting. I loved, obviously, the mariner played by Kevin Costner, and this catamaran, this kind of, literally was like a little bubble on this ocean. I mean, if you are one of the 10 people who've not seen Waterworld, this takes place in the future. The ice cap has melted completely, and the world is entirely made of water. And a small band of survivors are looking for land, and a young girl, Enola, has a map tattooed on her back that could take people to the promised land, and so it goes on. Yeah, Waterworld. What did you make of it?
Well, Pascal, I don't think that I've seen this film since we went to the cinema to see it after its original release. So my memories of it are very, very vague. I remember at the time thinking maybe that it was Mad Max on boats instead of Mad Max in cars. I had that image in my head that Kevin Costner was playing a very, very similar character to Mad Max, perhaps not as mad, but the vibe was there. Dennis Hopper was that sort of he's always a manic villain, isn't he? Dennis Hopper. What am I saying? But you know what I like. So I do remember being amazed by how on earth must they have done this? They've spent all that time in the water. But I don't genuinely have either positive or negative thoughts about it. It's just a film I saw, probably enjoyed at the time, but it's not one that I've sought out on Blu-ray or DVD. I don't own a copy of it on Blu-ray or VHS or whatever. It's just one of those films, and I don't know whether I've become a victim of the negativity that surrounds this film, and that I need to, and I probably will review it now, having had this conversation. But yeah, it was a good film, but it's just not one that's stuck in my mind. And like a film like Lord of the Rings would, or Die Hard, that I constantly go back to. This is one that I just haven't gone back to, and I don't know why.
And that's what I want to really explore, because, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, which is almost very, very unfair. So going back in time, literally, this movie was released in the summer. In the US and the UK in 1995. Then there was a very sluggish rollout across the rest of the world, to the point where it was in the autumn when it was released in France. And that's tricky, because this was really a desire by, I'm going to say Universal, I could be completely wrong. It is Universal. It was back to this idea of the summer blockbuster. This is meant to be the summer blockbuster. But you have an issue, because actually, once you do the research, and as I discovered, because I have a copy of the full version, which is around 3 hours long, we went to the movies to see a version that was 2 hours and 15. 45 minutes is a hell of a lot of slicing and dicing and hacking away, which means that what they had to strip out was the storyline and the bonding between the mariner, Kevin Costner, and the young girl, because at the beginning and more around the world and the survival, and actually they spend a bit longer on the island. So maybe already we have a compromised product, to use the term, when you go to the movies. But this movie inherited this unfair reputation, and I do say unfair because if you look at the financials, it was fine. I mean, they made their money and more. It was so good that people did a novel. There was video game. There was even an official pinball machine. There's in all the major Universal parks, Hollywood, Singapore, in Japan, and Beijing, they have a Waterworld zone where there's stunts and the storylines being retold and so on. So they're not particularly embarrassed about it. They're even talking about doing a TV series with the director of Prey. So for me, this movie began but being condemned by the critics whilst in production, because of what people took exception to the runaway cost and budget. So they were saying, hang on a minute, this is costing far too much money. And my reaction is, well, whose money is it? Why would you have such a strong view? And as you read and learn, particularly from interviews from Kevin Costner and the others, they were besieged by problems, bad weather, damaged sets. They had to rebuild them again. There was obviously people falling ill, and so on and so forth. And his view was, he always said to Universal Pictures, this is a $120 million movie, 140. They said, well, we'll give you half. So as a true entrepreneurs, he took half and then got what he wanted in the end. And then, of course, they had to add more for delays, repairs, and so on. Because of that, they also spent money on marketing, which you and I would approve. But that caused critics to be even more offended for some reason about how dare you spend your own money on marketing. But, when you have ambition like they had to create this world and natural elements working against you, you've got to spend the money. But that was just the most bizarre. And experts suggest that was the beginning of some of the poor use of the internet, because, of course, critics who had little to say and do about the movie because of the secrecy, they went on to criticize, the production cost.
Why did they launch such a truncated version, Pascal? Did you discover the reason for that? Was that a decision by the studio that it was just too long and we want you to edit it down?
There was two things. They lost their nerves.
Yes.
They believed that they could get more bombs on seats, not wishing to be crude about the expression, but in one day, how many sittings can you get? It's a bit like, using the aircraft analogy, how many seats can you have on the Boeing 747? And they really lost their nerves because of the mounting kind of negative feelings about it. And I'm going to add a layer of that. I think in general, the industry just had something with Kevin Costner. They just didn't seem to really warm to the guy. But this is a man that gave us Dances with Wolves, JFK, Robin Hood, and I don't know, there was something going on and they had to react accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it was anything to do with the competition from other films? I mean, there was certainly a lot of fairly sizable hits coming out in 1995. Toy Story, Stargate, Braveheart, Bridges Over Madison County, The Usual Suspects, Seven,
Oh, wow.
Heat, 12 Monkeys, Goldeneye. It was a bumper year for... I mean, look how many of those we've actually reviewed on the show. I mean, it's... yeah, maybe they just decided we need to try and make this more pacey. We need to cut it down to fit it in, as you say.
I mean, sorry, I'm suddenly being thrown back in time to '95. That was a good year to be a movie fan. My goodness, I'd forgotten about all that.
Yeah.
So I think for me, maybe as well with hindsight, so the desire to literally blow people's minds and surprise them, and they didn't want to reveal about the world of Waterworld. They wanted to shock you. They didn't even want to reveal, for example, talking about the opening scene. So the opening scene is really quite famous nowadays because it's about the Universal logo around the globe. And then slowly but surely, as the camera is swooping in, the ice cap is melting, which you can see. And little by little, the whole world becomes blue. And then you crossfade to, the real world. This was 1995, Roger. This was like quite a coup in terms of technology. But they thought, no, let's not show that to people. We want that to be revealed at the movie. So I think the secrecy also fueled this strange attack on the film by critics, because once people went to see the movie, they loved it, of course.
Yeah. No, it is bizarre. So what did they do with the marketing then, given the fact that they seem to be stacking the deck against themselves?
Well, quite a bit. So they began by releasing, obviously, quite striking posters. The one that we know universally is that picture of Kevin Costner standing out there, dressed, I would agree, that kind of Mad Max-esque outfit with a kind of harpoon gun, the term Waterworld, and at his feet you've got essentially the only kind of bit of oasis in this world, and Kevin Costner. And then the other one that was done, but I think was more for the US market, was more of a two-column design. On one hand, you've got the water with what we learned to be then the symbol of how to get to the promised land, and then a close-up of Kevin Costner's face, and you do that. And I think with hindsight, they could have done more with all the other characters. Again, time constraints, briefs, we don't know what it is. And then very quickly they released a teaser trailer. Well, that was quite enigmatic on purpose. They were showing the world, the characters, and so on. There was not the narration that we heard a moment ago from The Voice. And really people could see that this is actually a action-packed, entertaining movie for the family. I think that was also there for the family market. And then you had, obviously, later on the official trailer that we watched and heard. So what did they do to kind of counter this kind of strange attack? Then they invested, which is where the budget went in quite a significant number of TV spots and radio spots. So thanks to the wonderful people on YouTube who are kind of the librarians and archivists of the internet, I managed to discover about 15 different TV spots, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, extended TV spots of 2 minutes. And what was interesting, I'm going to take you back to the content spotlights. All the TV spots had a different opening scene. So going back to the characters, sometime we heard the voice of Deacon, played by Dennis Hopper. Sometime it was Jim Triplehorn. Sometime it was different characters. So whilst in general they all said the same thing, the way they started was always different. I thought was actually, what you would expect, but we're going back to 95, of course, and that's really quite fun to see. So you've got all of that going on, but I think they had to go beyond, and they realized that maybe the desire to surprise the audience but not revealing too much had worked against them. So then you move into magazines, you move into TV, radio, chat shows, and so on. And interestingly, Kevin Costner in particular spent quite a bit of time explaining how hard it had been to make Waterworld and what they were up against and so on, and almost, had that rekindled the respect of saying this is about ambition, this is about vision, and we now kind of get it more, and that encouraged people to go and see it. But all magazines from mainstream kind of lifestyle magazine all the way to movie publication. They had Kevin Costner on the front cover. For my part, I think at the time I was reading Total Film as a magazine. Did you ever kind of follow film magazines at all yourself?
Oh, yes. I started buying Empire magazine pretty
Right.
much as soon as it was originally published, and I do remember buying Total as well. Funnily enough, I don't really follow either of those their web versions. Um, I don't know why. I don't know why I've never followed them online. Maybe it was things like Internet Movie Database has just sort of taken that gap. I mean, to me, it's interesting because we've reviewed quite a few films with ensemble casts, haven't we? Where their marketing is focused on each of the individual characters, and the two that come to mind straight away, Death on the Nile, and also the work that we looked at for the TV series of The Rings of Power. You know, each of the characters had their own posters. Each of the characters had their own, almost like mini TV spots, trailers, whatever it was, or focusing in on the costume, focusing in on their character traits, and this, that, and the other. And to me, this would have been so apt for this film. They could have done a focus on Kevin Costner and on Enola and on Gene Triplehorn's character, and of course Dennis Hopper's character with his, you know, with all of his costumes and his mannerisms and that. And I think they did miss a trick there to focus in on the characters, and maybe that would have made the film more about everybody rather than just another vehicle for Kevin Costner.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very fair. You know, again, hindsight is wonderful things, and for me, I really understand why they didn't want to reveal. It's a bit like the Mandalorian, you know, keeping Grogu hidden from us and Luke Skywalker return. I totally understand that, and that didn't work for them. That just created a void of information and news that was filled in by essentially rubbish and just actually ill feelings, which I don't think was justified. I mean, to the point where they spend an absolute fortune, therefore, on the TV, radio spots, and magazines. They went ahead and began the process of introducing Waterworld attraction as an area within the Universal Studios theme park. But why wouldn't you? You know, it's your domain.
Yeah.
They even had research would suggest a partnership with Coca-Cola, where they had a limited edition Waterworld soda cans. So back to your reference to the water earlier, and each can featured images from the movie. So if somebody has now from 1995 one of those, it must be worth an absolute fortune. And so they went on with showcasing the music, doing the making of documentaries. But I would say after the release, and maybe that wasn't quite enough. But they carried on, and the movie got that. And I think for me, it peaked in '98 when the TV network ABC finally aired the nearly 3-hour version. They removed bits and bobs that was about swearing and too much violence, but people could see the 3-hour version, and that renewed interest in the movie. For my part, in 95, 96, I was working in a video rental store. I was just finishing my studies to then become a young marketing officer. And that movie, Waterworld, the cassette, VHS cassette for our younger viewers and listeners, was out all of the time. People loved watching it in the home environment. And in fact, its success really was in a home entertainment front.
That's really interesting how this has played out, isn't it? I mean, I think about some of those other films that we mentioned that came out the same year. Heat, Goldeneye.
Yeah.
You could argue that yes, this film was a victim of the early internet, and maybe the internet and the way the internet interacts with people and critics, and the fact that we could now communicate more widely. You'd think that almost like scapegoating might have been evident with other films, but I don't remember there being that sort of negativity surrounding any of those other films. In fact, they all probably benefited from the early days of the internet, whereas this one just seems to have been a victim of it. The other question I was going to ask you now is that, as I say, I don't have the DVD. I never bought the VHS. What was released on Blu-ray? Was it Is it now always been the 3-hour version, or does
So,
that
so if you go for
truncated
the
version still stick?
if you go for the distributor Arrow Video, which I think are based in Europe primarily, you have
Yeah,
two versions. You have the theatrical version, and you
yeah.
have what they call the Ulysses cut, which is just short of 3 hours. And the 3 hour version is a different experience altogether. We can well imagine 45 minutes extra in character development, in scene setting. You spend longer at the end on the island as well. It makes a lot of more sense. You understand more about Nola as well, her origin, but also the build up of the relationship, which at the start is completely fractious between the mariner, and which I think is also so clever. This is a man with no name, the mariner,
Yes.
and then in the relationship with Helen, played by Jean Truplehorn, and Enola, and how eventually he's changed. This is his kind of hero's journey for himself as well. It's just described a lot better. There's also, because of the 3 hours, a longer spent in looking at the water and the beauty of sunsets and so on. There's also things going on. So if anyone can get their hands on a copy, it's available. You can buy it online now. You will be a different viewing experience for sure.
So I think I do need to revisit this film, and you've inspired me to revisit this film, Pascal. But I am going to look for the Ulysses cut, I think, and I do think it needs to be enjoyed in 4K if that Ulysses cut is available in 4K. So I'm actually really quite looking forward to seeing this film again, and to reflect upon the fact that maybe the critics were unduly harsh on this, and just the fledgling early days of the internet actually created a scapegoat out of this film for reasons that we probably will never know.
No, absolutely. So thank you very much. It's been enjoyable to research it. I learned so much I didn't know about, but that link to marketing, to this idea of a well-intentioned desire to surprise and awe-inspire audiences that somehow backfired, because you leave, like I said, this void, and people want the news, they want to have something, and sadly they latch on to the negativity. And going back to the budget, which seems to have somehow offended people, like when you spend your own money. 2 years later, of course, we had Titanic.
Yes.
That was even more expensive, and nobody had anything. Well, maybe they did, and maybe I've missed it. But and so for me, Waterworld was also setting the trend into ambition, summer blockbusters, and let's spend the money that is ours. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah, and of course Titanic was nearly 3 hours long as well, if I remember right.
That's true, yeah.
There you go. So Pascal, great choice of film. Thanks for that. Thanks for all the research you've done. And thank you everybody who watched or listened to episode 95 of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We've really enjoyed this episode. Some great content spotlights, some great shout outs, some great news items. I'm just getting a really good vibe about everything we've discussed today. So thanks again, everybody. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do let us have your comments. You can talk to us on the YouTube channel. You can talk to us on Twitter. You can leave us a message on SpeakPipe, and just let us know what films you'd like us to review. Let us know what content is inspiring your marketing. So until the next episode, please go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. I was Roger Edwards, and he was Pascal Fintoni.